The next time you go to Niagara Falls, take me with you. I am an unofficial tour guide of the city of Niagara Falls. And anyone who will listen, I will tell you stories about Niagara Falls. Some of them may be true, others maybe not. I might have just made them up on the spot. When we were growing up, my family would go every Friday evening and Sunday evenings, and we would stand at the brink of the American Falls, and we would watch these spectacular displays of fireworks with our friends from church. And I would lecture them. You know, at night they lower the level of water. You know, we're empowered by electrical power. That made no sense at all. Hydroelectric. And then there were times when we would go down with some of our friends in the summer, in the warmer months, especially when it was dry, down into the Niagara Gorge, and we would walk around, and we'd be right there, right as the rapids were going into the whirlpool, and I would explain to them, you see these rapids? You don't want to kayak these. These are a Class 6 right here. And I'd point around, and we look, and there's rock slides. You can see it all over the place. And I would remind them that, you know, back in 1956, there was a rock slide that occurred that destroyed the entire, see, I make this up on the spot when I'm there. The power plant, the so-called power plant, just came down in 1956, and when it came down, it wiped out a quarter of the tax revenue for the city of Niagara Falls. I grew up on the edge of Love Canal, and I can tell you what it was like seeing a whole community boarded up, and what it was like to ride my bike through there and see houses that have been set on fire by arsonists. Or I can take you downtown to where the casino stands today and tell you that before this was a casino, this was the Niagara Falls Convention Center. And that right out in front of the convention center was this outdoor public ice skating rink. Or how back in the day, all of Niagara Falls, all downtown Niagara Falls was decorated for Christmas with the Festival of Lights. Or I can take you just outside of Niagara Falls, right by the air base, and I can point to the spot that I was standing in 1986 when two Blue Angel jets crisscrossed and hit each other in midair. I was there. I can tell you about that. There's so many more things that I can tell you about Niagara Falls. I love Niagara Falls. It's where I grew up. So if I'm not careful and go back to my manuscript, I'll just keep talking about Niagara Falls. Now, I suspect that there are plenty of folks in this room today who could walk us down memory lane and tell us what Westfield was like back in the day. And they could provide for us a mix of histories with probably small embellishments along the way. You know, recently I was visiting with one of my neighbors back when it was still kind of warm out, and we sat on the porch one day and we were talking, and he says, yeah, my house has something like 22 rooms in it. I'm like, really? I haven't gotten a tour of it yet. Really? And he was, yeah, there's 22, 23 rooms in the house, and each of the walls are 2 feet thick with concrete. Several have mentioned in passing the day when the house was moved down Main Street. I've seen pictures online of that day. You recall that date, which we're sitting now. Or the statue at the stoplight that tells of the influence of Grace's letter to Abraham Lincoln and how he visited Westfield once upon a time. One Sunday afternoon, I was right by the back doors, and a member shared with me a few years ago that there was a hotel that used to stand right here, and he told me all about the hotel. And of course, I've seen the Facebook posts a while back of locals reminiscing of the storefronts and the families that used to exist here in our beloved community. And last week I was standing right here sharing with a couple that had walked into the sanctuary. They wanted to see the place after the Paddock funeral. And we're in here and we're reminiscing about this. Oh yeah, these are old stained glass windows, and the names in the windows in this room are just ordinary people, farmers and teachers from our community that we've loved. Or how we've been worshiping in this room since 1871. And how there used to be a time, we actually had to pour a concrete floor in the basement because the Sunday school, which is overflowing with all of these people, it's wonderful to tell these kinds of stories, and you know them inside of you this morning. And even if we do not have command of history like Billy Dibble, I would argue that among us we have some excellent tour guides for Westfield. This morning, the preacher in Hebrews provides what one theologian describes as a very inventive passage. The preacher becomes our tour guide of sorts, starting out with the old desert tabernacle found way back in the second half of the book of Exodus, with the hope of returning to the sacrifice of Jesus. At the tabernacle, the guide opens the flap doors and welcomes us in, where we are greeted with lampstands and a table with the bread of presence. And as we look around, we are struck with a sense of the history of the place, as we recall the stories of the faithful who have come before us. The tour guide boasts with a smile, "If this impresses you, wait until I show you what is behind this other curtain." And another flap is pulled back and a holier place is revealed. In fact, it is the holiest place in the tabernacle. It's called the Holy of Holies. The Holy of Holies is restricted to ordinary people like us, with only the high priest authorized to enter it once a year. The revelation reminds me of the movie National Treasure. Everyone see National Treasure with Nicolas Cage. Nicolas Cage plays this character called named Ben Gates. And Ben Gates steals the Declaration of Independence and deciphers that there is a hidden map, a treasure map, on the back of it. In the Holy of Holies, everything is covered in gold. A golden jar of manna, a golden incense altar, a golden ark of the covenant. I mean, just a moment, we try to fathom the weight or the worth of all the gold. The tour guide announces before we are ready to budge, it's time to keep moving. And all the stall tactics that we have employed don't seem to work, as the tour guide keeps on schedule, muttering something like, "Of these things we cannot speak now in detail." You know, it has been years since I was last visiting the King Tut exhibit in Dallas. But in some strange way, my mind has never left the museum wanting to know more. And honestly, I am just as fascinated with the scenes of the Titanic and its debris on the ocean floor as I was the day that the movie came out, wanting to explore the staircase and the dining room and the bedrooms and the hallways. So I get why we might want to linger near the old tabernacle. However, the tour guide whistles as an old worship song from the 1980s, one that we may have forgotten long ago. "Lord, you are more precious than silver. Lord, you are more costly than gold. Lord, you are more beautiful than diamonds, and nothing I desire compares with you." At Christmas time, I love to walk through the castle at Old Fort Niagara. The fort is decorated for the time period as are the actors in their costumes. And as you wander through the candlelight or candlelit rooms or warm yourself by one of its many fireplaces, you can watch the actors perform their duties of what they would have done back in the 1800s. And my favorite part is that you can interact with the actors and ask them questions, and they often respond with really insightful answers. The preacher of Hebrews draws us, the congregation, into the beehive of the customary rituals of worship. However, it is the lone high priest we might notice on that day of atonement who offers a sacrifice of blood for his own sins and the sins of the people there in the tabernacle. The preacher's tour through the tabernacle and the role of the high priest on the Day of Atonement functions as an illustration or a parable. A parable, C.H. Dodd famously stated, leaves the mind in sufficient doubt about its precise application to tease into active thought. And so we might have a few burning questions of our own. Do Jews still offer animal sacrifices? How precisely does the blood of an animal atone for sins? Do Christians need a high priest? Are we required to make sacrifices? And as we slowly make our way through the world of the Old Testament and round the corner into the New, the tour guide promises, I've saved the best for last. Come to find out, the entire tour centers on the classical lesser to greater argument. And the guide announces Christ came as high priest of the good things that are already here. And one theologian proclaims, the high priestly work of Christ has gone both higher and deeper than the blood shed and sprinkled under the old covenant. You know, in a world where everything is passing away, high priests come and go, buildings deteriorate with time, and the effectiveness, apparently, of animal sacrifices wears thin within a year. Jesus, our high priest, enters the true tabernacle of heaven to intercede for us, gaining for us our eternal redemption. And I suspect that the tour guide would stop us in mid-stride and we would accidentally bump into one another and step on the back of each other's heels. And then the tour guide would gesture to a hill far away out on the outskirts of Jerusalem, where Jesus, for a world of lost sinners, was slain upon a cross, and his sinless and unblemished life was offered as a sacrifice that was more potent than anything the world has ever known before or even now. In seminary, I wore a black t-shirt I was given that read, I was saved by a blood donor. And the message is doubly true for me. When I was a little kid, I lost blood, a lot of blood on the operating table, and I am here in part because somebody donated blood and saved my life. But the other part, for me, the more important part, is that Christ died 2,000 years ago. And he offered his life as a sacrifice. And through his blood, I am able to be confident in who Christ is and the staying power of his sacrifice in my life. And the truth of the matter is, so can we. You know, after the temple in Jerusalem was destroyed in 70 AD, the Jews no longer offered animal sacrifices, because they had nowhere to offer them. The temple was gone. And as Christians, we do not offer sacrifices because Jesus has more than fulfilled what the blood and the goats and bulls were able to accomplish. That Jesus was able to cleanse our hearts. Several years ago, I was on a self-guided tour of the 6th floor museum. And nobody who enters this museum worries that they will somehow spoil the ending. I was not surprised when I looked down at the highway below, marked with the X's indicating where the bullet struck President John F. Kennedy. You know, we might be grateful, but we are not surprised of the unfolding importance of Christ's sacrifice this morning. We have sung of his death in our hymns, read about it in our devotionals, and for 200 years in this space, it has been the message proclaimed among our congregation. Today, when we leave church, I want us to look around at the rich history that surrounds us and our community, and to tell the stories that you have heard and know. To borrow the words of our tour guide from Hebrews, how much more then? How much more then should we search for the meaning of Christ's death for us and practice giving a guided tour of salvation history to anyone who might listen? I offer this to you this morning in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and the Holy Spirit. And all God's people said,